is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Andy Kostka live on a Wednesday in February. I am back in not terribly cold Baltimore, but still colder than where Andy is. He's in Sarasota, Florida. He's currently watching fielding drills at Ed Smith Stadium. This is going to be the catcher episode. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about Adley Rutschman. We're going to talk about how he can bounce back in 2026 and Andy's great story about him on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a hear me out. And it has to do with rostering a third catcher. I know what you're thinking, but we'll get into it in just a bit. But first, Andy, let's do some quick updates from camp, because the last time John and I came on this podcast, we had not yet talked to Jackson Holliday. We had not yet talked to Heston Kjerstad. Updates on both those guys. To start with Jackson Holliday, he had surgery to remove the broken hamate bone in his right hand. He is hoping to be back in now about 2.5 weeks. He's hoping to be back in hitting live batting practice, that is, which would put his start to the season on a little bit of a hold. But they're hoping that they can get him back within a few weeks after opening day. So that is positive news. He said it's pretty routine surgery. It's the easiest kind of surgery you can get, because they just go in there, they take out the hamate bone, they shave down a few other things, and he's hoping that he is going to be back. However, will he be back at his full strength? That is to be determined. And then one more update. Heston Kjerstad, fully healthy, back at camp, already hitting a couple homers in live batting practice. Hasn't played in a pro game since last July. It has been a while since we've seen Heston Kjerstad back on the backfields, back swinging at the plate. Good to see him back there, but he didn't detail what caused him to miss so much time, which is, of course, his right. But it has been a while, and it has been a lot of mystery around Heston Kjerstad. And, of course, he's making a change to his stride. If you saw the video on our social channels, Heston Kjerstad no longer doing that big, giant leg kick at the plate. He said he is working on a smaller load, a smaller stride towards the plate, and he's going to see how it goes. So, Andy, so many news and notes off the top. And how you doing? How are you reacting to all this stuff as you're taking in Orioles spring training?
Doing great. It is played some pickleball last night.
Nice.
Went, a loss and a win. So
no injuries on your front, right?
No injuries on my front.
Nice.
Jackson Holliday at this very moment is standing with a glove at second base.
Okay.
The feeling is that he's going to be able to field grounders more quickly than he will swing a bat, obviously. He won't be doing the throwing, initially. He's really just fielding with one hand. Yesterday in the clubhouse, I said, "What's up, Jackson?" And he stuck out his right hand, which is he had the removal right here. Mm-hmm. Stuck out his right hand. The cast is now off, but it's still wrapped. And he went for a fist bump. And it was the softest little, I was like, I am not going to be the reason. I'm not the reason you have a setback. I'm so soft little fist bump. I was not going to smack that guy's hand. No way. That was a frightening moment, actually. I was like, I cannot be the story. Heston Kjerstad has looked good, as you mentioned. We will see in grapefruit games beginning Friday, all these guys. It's obviously different playing in games against pitchers you don't see all the time. Batters tend to be behind pitchers in their, flow, whatever you want to call it. What else from camp? Kowser talked about some swing tweaks. You were there for that. You want to dive into that?
Sure. Colton Kowser obviously had a lot of strikeouts last year. He really struggled with swing and miss last season. He spent a lot of time during this offseason focusing on some minor changes to his swing. Colton Kowser, of course, coming into a massive year for him, coming off a season which he hit below the Mendoza line. He is trying to get himself back. He's going to be the everyday center fielder. He said he is treating it as such. There's really nobody else on this roster, with the exception of Leody Taveras, who I think we could consider on the roster bubble, who can play center. And when we talked to Craig Alvarez, he mentioned the possibility of Dylan Beavers playing center field. Dylan Beavers played center at Cal when he was back in college. He played a little bit of it in the minor leagues. We talked to him afterwards. He said, basically the coaching staff said, we're going to throw you in there for a few times in spring. Don't be shocked. But he's kind of the break glass in case of emergency option there. Kind of like, I wouldn't say Jorge Mateo, because Jorge Mateo obviously was going from the infield to the outfield and was not nearly as prepared to play center. But Dylan Beavers also said the reads in center are maybe a little bit easier, whereas if you're in a corner, you have to worry about side spin, you have to worry about the ball tailing away from you. I would be interested to see how Dylan Beavers performs in center if they throw him out there in Grapefruit League action.
Just like Blaze Alexander, he's another option. In utility infielder, could play a little center. But we will stick back to catchers as we promised. Paul, take it away to catchers.
Sure, I'll go back to catchers. Let's talk about Adley Rutschman, because you wrote a great story that people can read on thebanner.com about how Adley Rutschman is going to bounce back in 2026. Dealt with multiple oblique injuries in 2025. The production was not where it was the previous seasons. And every season since he has come into the big leagues, his WAR has gone down. Two-time All-Star, turning 28 this season. This will be his age 28 season. And now he has a little bit of added pressure in the form of Samuel Basallo, who is still one of the top prospects in all of baseball, showed a lot of flashes last year. The Orioles still believe he can catch. And Adley Rutschman is now 2 years away from free agency. So there is a lot riding on this season for Adley Rutschman. And when he talked to the media and when he talked to you, Andy, he talked about grappling with his baseball mortality. I want to read one of the quotes that he had from your story. He said, quote, "I talk about having a finite amount of time in the league, and you just never know when that's going to be it, and you just want to make sure you make the most of it. I think everyone wants to reach their potential as a baseball player. I think trying to do all you can so you don't have any regrets at the end is the biggest thing," end quote. Andy, you've talked to Adley a lot over the course of Adley's career. I've talked to Adley a good amount too. He is one of the most thoughtful and insightful baseball players that we've gotten to talk to. And I think that's a huge, huge positive for him, because it allows him to take a step back and appreciate everything that's going on. I mean, no better public example of that is when he made his big league debut and he stopped and turned around and took in the moment. He is fully present, and he is somebody who thinks about the game in a deep way. I'm curious, what was your reaction when you heard Adley talk about having a finite time in the league and thinking about leaving the game with no regrets?
Yeah, well, we both just turned 28, so maybe we just hit our late 20s, and I think maybe we're both in an existential crisis about what is coming. No, I'm joking. We both turned 28, but that is not the Adley that I'm getting here. I'm really getting is this is a guy who is incredibly motivated to be the best version of himself every single day. And while I think he can look back on his preparation, proudly in many respects, every year that he's been, a professional baseball player, even at Oregon State, obviously, he doesn't want to plateau, or in this case, he took a major step back last year in the latter half of 2024. He wants to maximize his potential. And so I think when he talks about this finite space in baseball, there's this idea that truly you don't know when this might end. One bad injury, right? And this could be over. So he just is very cognizant of doing every little thing he can to put himself in the best situation possible. And then he will not live and die by the results necessarily, but if he does every little thing correctly and sets himself up for success, he hopes the success will come. It's a mature mind, frame of mind. I think I've always appreciated he's been sometimes in groups he can kind of be a little blasé and in a group scrum setting. Just talk about the process, things like that. He tends to get a little bit more insightful in a smaller setting when it's more one-on-one. This was definitely an Adley Rutschman when he was talking, a few days ago when I did that interview. This was a guy that understood that he has shown his potential, but he hasn't necessarily maximized it, and he has a lot more to go. And so he's very hell-bent on trying to reach that point where he can be the best version of himself. And I know he's 28, but this is a position that, is very difficult on bodies. And so, you don't necessarily know how long you have as a catcher, and you might have to shift positions someday. But right now, he's looking great physically. He spent just kind of diving into his offseason a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
He, did some swing changes, and we're looking actually at his left-handed swing. I believe you took this video. Great video.
Thank you.
He focused a lot on this left-handed swing. He wants that back elbow to have room to work. So his hands are going to be a little farther away from his body when he starts the swing. And that allows his swing plane to be level through the zone for a longer amount of time. He thought last year, and this is going to be, I'm not a lefty, so bear with me. He thought last year his elbow got stuck in here, his back elbow. And because it got stuck in there, he was sliding out of the zone a little quickly. And when he's sliding out of the zone more quickly, there's just the timing has to be so perfect to actually make good contact. He's going to be more pull side oriented when he, is quick out of the zone. And this, when he has more room to work and he's through, level through the zone for a lot longer, if he's late on a pitch, he can smack that to left field. If he's early on a changeup or something, he's still level. He can pull that thing, to right field. So it should give him, in his own words, he wants to hit line drives. It should allow him to do that at a more frequent level than he did in the past.
Yeah.
He also he's trying to, if you watch I believe that is his left leg there, he wants to be more on his back hip, more weight on his back hip longer, which will allow him to, instead of falling forward and potentially getting out of whack mechanically, if he stays on his back hip, he can adjust to off speed a little easier by holding there a split second longer if he realizes it's an off speed compared to a fastball. So those are the two major swing adjustments. And when I say major, I really mean like these are so minute. This is the way, baseball players look at this stuff. It's very small changes, but the idea is to increase opposite field potential, help his timing, and also increase his line drive rate.
Yeah, and this is a great incentive for people who are listening on any audio platforms to go check out our video, because we're playing some video of Adley. No, as Adley is taking his cuts and Andy's explaining this on YouTube, Facebook, or X. Adley, we've said this from the moment he got drafted and from the moment he debuted. He has a little bit of a complex swing. That's not a bad thing. It just means everything has to be in harmony. And when he is out of whack, one little thing can just kind of throw his swing off at any one moment. And I remember last year, Brandon Hyde out of the gate saying, let's get back to Adley Rutschman hitting doubles. Let's get back to Adley Rutschman hitting the ball, where they ain't. And let's not focus so much about driving the ball over the wall, because that was the issue in the second half of 2024. First half of 2024 was phenomenal. He hits a career high home runs before the All-Star break. He looks like he's maximizing his power potential. He's not walking as much, but it's not an issue. And then second half of 2024 into the playoffs, his offensive production starts to fall off a cliff. And in 2025, he really just did not look like the same hitter at the plate. And it wasn't just the injuries. So you're hoping that he can kind of strike that balance between being somebody who can drive the ball over the wall and being a 20-plus home run type catcher, but also being somebody who is a clutch hitter who can just drive the ball to all parts of the field. It's just not, it's not the same thing. And every swing requires things to go right. But Gunnar Henderson just has so much raw potential, so much raw power that even when he misses, even when he's not himself, he can still drive the ball. Adley Rutschman needs everything to kind of go right in his swing in order for things to work. And it has gone right in a lot of in the first several years of his career. But ultimately, Andy, it's just interesting because for Adley, it just feels so much more mental than anything else. He thinks about this in different ways, and he's always thinking about ways that he can improve. And every offseason, it feels like he comes into spring training and he's got a different thing that he's thinking about, a different way to view the game, a different mindset. And I think it's fascinating because when he's talking about his baseball mortality, these strike me as comments that you would get from somebody who's 34, 35 years old, who's nearing the end of his baseball life, who is ready to ride off into the sunset and is thinking now about, I've been playing this game for 8, 9, 10 years. I want to make the most of it now. Adley Rutschman's 28. I mean, he is already thinking about making the most of his time. When guys haven't yet hit 30, they're often just kind of in the day-to-day grind of this. And so for him to be thinking that far ahead just shows how deeply he thinks about the game, on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, but this is a guy that he doesn't want to get to 33 and realize that he didn't make the most of
right.
This. That's a major part of this is Adley is a deep thinker. He is really cares, about how this goes and being a stable presence in the clubhouse for this team. And he might not be the most vocal leader of all time, but I do think he is a leader by the work he does and kind of that even keel that he keeps. Those comments were really fascinating to me. Just that doesn't want to have any regrets when he's done playing, even if that's in 10 years. Doesn't want to have regrets. And what's a good way to not have regrets? It's by doing things the right way at this stage of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, sticking on the catcher topic, Adley Rutschman, I think it's safe to say, Andy, he's a lock to make this roster. I think Samuel Basallo is a lock to make this roster, but
that's big
if true. But we're going to talk about how the Orioles are going to fill out the rest of the roster. And I know they still have 5 weeks before they have to break camp and come north and start to focus on regular season baseball. They are still, slow playing, worried about Jordan Westberg, who suffered his oblique strain a few weeks ago. So they're hoping they can get him back into Grapefruit League action. He'll be ready for the start of the season. They know they will be without Jackson Holliday to start the season. That creates one open spot. That spot's definitely going to be filled by Blaze Alexander. I think it's safe to say somebody who doesn't have any options, somebody who can play all over the diamond. They like the fact that Blaze Alexander, there's a reason they traded 3 players in order to get him. But then the rest of the roster spots are still up for grabs. You got Jeremiah Jackson in the mix, who shone in his first introduction to the big leagues last year. You still have Ryan Mountcastle and Kobe Mayo on this roster, 2 right-handed hitting first basemen who are duplicative with what you already have in Pete Alonso. And then how you fill out the rest of the roster between Dylan Beavers and Leody Taveras got me thinking, and I started to think this in conversations with the Baltimore Sun's Jacob Calvin Meyer, of whether the Orioles should consider rostering a third catcher on their opening day roster. And I know what you're thinking. It's crazy. Andy's already shaking his head. And that's the exact same thing I told Jacob Calvin Meyer when he presented this to me. I said, the Orioles have 2 catchers. They have Adley Rutschman and Samuel Basallo. That catching duo would be one of the best in major leagues if those guys are healthy. If both those guys are hitting their potential, the Orioles should have the best backstops in the big leagues. Why would they want a third catcher? But then I went back to conversations that we were having this offseason about the possibility of the Orioles having a third catcher. And I thought, well, not only is it nice that if somebody goes down in a game and you have one of your catchers is behind the plate, the other one's DHing, you have a third option to throw in the game so you don't need a DH. That's a nice added benefit, but that's not the real reason I'm thinking about this. The real reason I think this might make sense is because Adley Rutschman and Samuel Basallo are 2 of your most valuable players. They're 2 of the most important players to have healthy and on the field. Adley Rutschman has never caught more than 104 games in a season in his big league career. Samuel Basallo has caught more than 56 games in a minor league season just once in his career. Adley Rutschman is better as a hitter, as a DH, than he is when he is catching. Samuel Basallo is still developing as a young catcher. And if you were trying to keep both those guys healthy for the long run, wouldn't it help to have somebody who could start once a week, could come off the bench twice a week, could take up 4 to 6 at-bats from those guys and get them off their feet and make sure that your players, your best players, are playing at their best? Does that make any sense to you, Andy?
It makes a lot of sense. I'm still going to disagree with you.
That's fine. That's fine.
You're spitting facts, as the kids say. But I don't know. Actually, kids say that anymore. But
no clue.
It makes sense to want to manage the catching workloads of these guys, but purely from a sense of you probably, in my opinion, they will carry 5 outfielders, and that group is going to be O'Neill, Taylor Ward, Colton Cowser, Dylan Beavers, and Leody Taveras. So if you have those 5, you may have, 6 infielders? Which would be Pete Alonso, Ryan Mountcastle, Blaze Alexander, Gunnar Henderson, Kobe
Jordan
Mayo,
Westberg,
and Jordan Westberg. Is that 6?
I think so.
Unless, and there's Jackson. Always a possibility. Yeah. The thing is Jeremiah with the option might start, in AAA. Or Kobe Mayo might start in AAA. So I think those are probably, the interchangeable. You can option one of them if you want to play one of them at third, because you never really know with oblique injuries in Westberg. They might play it a little bit safe. You never really know. So you might want to give him a day every once in a while. So how are you going to have that infield and that outfield with 3 catchers? I mean, just purely from a mathematical standpoint, I don't think you can do it. I do acknowledge the reasoning you have. But think of this. I originally was saying 3 catchers because I thought Basayo was going to play a lot of first base. And now you have Pete Alonso, who's probably going to start 140 games at first base. I mean, this is an Iron Man type guy. And I say that literally looking at Cal Ripken Jr.'s on the field as I talk about. So maybe that's sacrilege coming out of my mouth. But he's a guy that wants to play every day. And so you're looking at, some DH days, from him, which gets him off his feet. Rutschman some DH days. But that DH, is also going to be, Tyler O'Neill. Taylor Ward is going to need a DH day probably once a week. There's a lot of different ways this looks. I don't think you want to waste. I don't mean to diminish Sam Huff or Maverick Hanley in any way, but use a roster spot on a third catcher that offensively is probably not going to give you very much upside. If you have an issue, Taylor Ward is technically capable of catching a ball behind the backstop. He did a little bit in the minors, actually came up as a catcher, really a left fielder now, obviously, but I'm sure he could flash back and be an emergency catcher, and you have the taxi squad where you can have a guy in the wings if you need to make a roster move. I've been wrong so many times before, so I'm not saying this is exactly the way it's going to be. And I understand where you and Jacob Kauer-Meyer are coming from. Personally, I don't see it because I prefer the infield flexibility of having 6 infielders, and I feel better about having 5 outfielders because I want Leody Taveras' outfield defense for late game substitution opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's my explanation.
Oh, it's all right. There we go. I bounced out and bounced back in.
Oh, we flipped. That's pretty exciting.
I'm not sure I agree with him myself. I mean, I still am on the fence about this. I just think it's a fascinating thought experiment. We're talking about Sam Huff, by the way, who, a lot of Orioles fans might not be familiar with the name. He's 28 years old, 98 career big league games over 5 seasons, has a 247 career average with 12 homers and a 104 OPS plus. Played just 20 games last year with San Francisco after starting his career with Texas. So, he is obviously not an experienced big league hitter, but has a little bit of run in the big leagues as well. I think the fascinating discussion here, and the one that you can really debate, is whether Leody Taveras would make this team, and whether he would make this team better. Because your 4 outfielders, you assume Dylan Beavers, Tyler O'Neill, those 2 guys could form some kind of platoon. You have Colton Cowser in center. You have Taylor Ward. But do you want somebody on your bench who can legitimately play center? Because Taylor Ward has done it before, but he can't really, you don't want him in center field anymore. Tyler O'Neill can't play center. Talked about the possibility of Dylan Beavers, but that is a break glass in case of emergency type situation. So you're really only talking about Colton Cowser being the only guy who can play center. And we saw Colton Cowser suffer a lot of injuries last season, in part because of how hard he plays in center and his running into walls and hurting his ribs and diving for balls. And that kind of play is...
He's 110% kind of guy, and you love that, and you want a player like that, but it is you probably need a backup plan just in case something
Yes,
happens.
and you don't want him to play through injuries. And you don't want him to feel like he should play through injuries, because we've seen it. Austin Hayes is the prime example of somebody who his production dipped when he was playing through a lot of injuries. So you want Colton Cowser to either be healthy or to be sitting on the bench if he's not feeling like himself. Leody Taveras gives you somebody who can legitimately play center, and that's certainly a massive boon. But on the flip side, he's making $2 million this year. You signed him very early in the offseason for a $2 million deal, which means that if you were to try to sneak him through waivers, he probably wouldn't get claimed by a team, because that team would have to take on his salary. You don't really want to be paying a guy for the rest of the season $2 million when, you are probably could potentially DFA that guy a week later. So if the Orioles were to DFA him early in the season because he's out of options, there's a good chance he sneaks through waivers and is on your AAA roster, and that opens up a roster spot for you. Blaze Alexander is another guy who can play center. So you acquired somebody who, he's definitely going to be used in the infield early in the season with Jackson Holliday being out. But Blaze Alexander can also play center field. So you have another option there. So, and throw in the fact that Leody Taveras was not a good hitter last year. I mean, he was DFA'd early in the season. He had a 53 OPS plus, which means he was about half as effective as the average hitter in the big leagues. You can't really count on him for any offense. So I'm curious to see if the Orioles really are willing to go with 4 outfielders and 4.5 if you consider Blaze Alexander somebody who can play in the outfield, and give that spot on the bench to somebody who is not an outfielder.
It's very possible. I like where your head's at. We're talking roster machinations. It's February 18. The sun is out.
I know, it's so early.
Things are great. I don't know. This will change 14 times during camp, right? Because it's going to be like, oh my goodness, so and so has a nagging ankle injury. It's gonna change. Every week it feels like. But
yeah,
I will say, taking Mike Elias is somebody who really likes to have defensive security, I think, and Leody brings that. So I recognize that he's a well below average hitter at this point, of his career, but the defensive versatility is, and in fact, a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks at this point, Mike Elias called Leody Taveras, an incredibly important, versatile piece for this team. Something along those lines. The direct quote would be on my Twitter page somewhere. What I glean from that is that even if they DFA Leody and he sneaks through into the minors, they expect Leody to play important innings for this team, especially as a defensive replacement at all 3 outfield positions he can play. That's my take on it. I would imagine he breaks camp with the team. If you go with the 4 outfielders, it does give you an opportunity to have more of a bench bat presence. Be it Kobe Mayo on your bench, and believe that he can play third base. We have seen him actually almost exclusively at third base so far in camp, which is interesting.
What do you make of that?
And potentially,
to go off on the tangent here.
To go on, I love tangents, man. I think what I make of Kobe Mayo at third base is that with Jackson Holliday out for the beginning of the season, and kind of a little bit of a question mark on Jordan Westberg on exactly when he will return, and if and when he returns to games, it's he probably moves to second in the interim before third base being kind of his primary position. It's helpful to have a guy that can play third base. Plus, Mayo's not going to get much playing time with the current roster construction at first base. Pete Alonso, as we said, is going to get the lion's share. Ryan Mountcastle, fantastic bench bat. I think people are so hell-bent on trading a guy, but they need to kind of remember that you need a pinch hit option. Late game situation, lefty on the mound. My goodness, Ryan Mountcastle off the bench. I think a lot of teams would be incredibly fortunate to have a guy of that caliber on their bench, able to pinch hit late in the game. And obviously, maybe a DH day here and there, especially that sort of thing. All of that is to say, I think Kobe has looked playable at third base. We know his ceiling probably is that of a league average third baseman. He did show a lot of progress as a first baseman. I think he proved he could be a league average first baseman last year. But I will say this is also a tangent based on the tangent. At a certain point, as Baltimore, I'm sorry, people listening. This is what you get when I'm on. At a certain point, Baltimore needs to decide what his position is, because he made a lot of progress at first base last year. That took away from reps at third base. If you continually switch his position and maybe even say like, hey, you want to play a little right field, he is going to have incremental, but then there's also declines in certain other positions because he's not getting everyday reps there. So at a certain point, like, Baltimore needs to decide who is Coby Mayo for this team, what position is he going to play, and then go all in on development at that position. And this obviously changed. Like, they were looking for an impact bat this offseason. That impact bat might have been Kyle Schwarber, but Kyle Schwarber went back to Philly. That would have been right field and DH, and that would have completely changed the calculus of this team. And Coby Mayo would probably be in that mix with Ryan Mountcastle at first base and would not be playing third right now. But as soon as Kyle Schwarber went back to Philly, Baltimore pivoted really quickly to Pete Alonso, and because they wanted that big veteran, presence in the lineup that takes some pressure off of the younger guys, to be at first base. And so it completely changed the calculus of this team. Almost everything that Baltimore worked on last year, and all those that Coby Mayo put at first base, and I'm not saying that goes out the window. I think he still has a great future. He could have a great future at first base, and I think he will. However, in the interim, if you're playing him at third base, it's taking away developmental time at first base. So pick a position, and that's the end of my tangent. I will stop doing that.
No, I mean, with Coby Mayo,
sorry,
we saw
I don't even know what the subject was anymore. But
no. Well, let's keep going down that road, because these are all dominoes that connect. I mean, this plays into the third catcher conversation, because Coby Mayo, if he's occupying a roster spot on this team, how many at-bats a week is he realistically going to get? Because if you want a bench bat righty who can play first base, you have Ryan Mountcastle. And Ryan Mountcastle plays better defensive first base than Coby Mayo does at this point in his career. And Ryan Mountcastle, at small sample size, but has a .324 batting average in 41 at-bats coming off the bench. So he can show that he can be a little bit of microwave offense if he comes off the bench. Coby Mayo, for all of the talent that he possesses, just hasn't shown yet that he can be a big leaguer. And if you are wanting to give him, an opportunity, wouldn't he be better served getting daily opportunities in AAA? And it sucks. It would suck to send him back down to AAA. But what's the point of having Coby Mayo on this team if he's getting 4 to 6 at-bats a week? And if you're just giving him like 4 to 6 at-bats a week, then maybe you'd rather just use that spot on a guy who can try to keep Adley Rutschman and Samuel Basallo healthy by taking those at-bats, those games away from him. And I just can imagine fans' reactions if and when Sam Huff makes this roster over Coby Mayo, and the first lineup that has Sam Huff in there, people are just going to burn down all the social media sites. It's going to be a sight to see. But in my mind, it wouldn't be the end of the world, because you want to give Coby Mayo regular games. We saw how much that helped him at the end of last season, was being regularly in the lineup. And you also want to keep Samuel Basallo and Adley Rutschman healthy. So it just wouldn't be insane to me.
It wouldn't be insane to me. However, I will, from the other side, I am a Coby Mayo believer in terms
I am too.
What we've seen offensively. What we've seen offensively at the major league level, I don't think is anywhere near who he is. I mean, just think about September 2025. He's played 24 games in September 2025. And this is acknowledging exactly what you said with regular playing time. He's a guy that needs that regular playing time to get a feel at the plate. So I'm acknowledging you're onto something there. If he can get anything like regular playing time, be it at third base, be it at DH, every once in a while at first base, whatever you want to do, if you can have at-bats at a reasonable level at the major league level, I mean, geez, this guy had a 900 OPS in a 301 average in September 2025. And I realize it's 24 games. But that was, and he's probably not going to produce that over 162 game season. I mean, those are all-star numbers, MVP numbers, that are probably not where he's going to be at immediately. But his bat at the AAA level has been so good. I think either you believe in your player development system and you believe in the guys you drafted, or you don't. And so I think more absolutely believes in what Coby Mayo can do at the plate. Perhaps there's a little bit more hesitancy about him being an everyday third baseman. Obviously, he probably wouldn't be an everyday third baseman once Jackson Holliday returns, because Jordan Westburg would probably be the guy there if and when he's healthy. So those are the. We can talk in circles about this, and I don't think, honestly, I see your point. I totally understand it. Everything makes sense that Paul said. It's just I just believe that there's no 100% certain answer, and whichever way they're going to go is probably going to be fine. And I still think Coby can be a dude at the plate. It's just really a question of, is he going to get enough at bats to make it worthwhile? Which then brings me back to your point, which is maybe he starts in AAA.
Right.
I mean, I don't have an opinion.
No, I mean, so many of these problems would also be fixed if he could play good third base. I mean, so many of these issues, because if Coby Mayo could play a solid third base, not Gold Glove caliber, but a solid third base, to me, there would be no question that you keep him on your opening day roster, because with Jordan Westburg recovering from his oblique injury, and with Jackson Holliday being out for the first several weeks of the season, you move Westburg over to second and you have Coby Mayo play third base, because I do believe he will hit if he's given regular opportunities. But it's just, can he play third base at an above average level? Will we see him in a corner outfield at some point? I think is another question too, because that could add value. But some guys just can only play first, and that's fine. Ryan Mountcastle was drafted as a shortstop, tried to play left field, couldn't do it, and turned out to be an excellent first baseman. And maybe if Coby Mayo works exclusively at first, he can be a Gold Glove caliber first baseman like Ryan Mountcastle has become. But on this roster specifically, I think they would need him to play first base. And this is all assuming, I mean, who knows? The Orioles could trade Coby Mayo or Ryan Mountcastle in a week, and we're not having this conversation. Everything could change. Somebody could go down in a Grapefruit League game in 2 weeks, and we're not having this conversation, and nothing matters. So this is all very premature. I'm sorry to have wasted your time, Andy, while you're watching spring training baseball. But this is just kind of a fascinating look at where this team is right now. Grapefruit League games start Friday too.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. Yeah. So Grapefruit games. Ken Rosenthal reported a couple of days ago that Baltimore continues kind of listen and or talk about the potential of trades for including Mountcastle and or Coby Mayo. Not source, speculation. Let that be known first. I think it would take an offer at this point to really blow Baltimore away, and probably they would have to get somebody back in this deal. Pitching obviously is a big one, potentially bullpen, but they probably need somebody that they feel comfortable with as a depth infielder who can step into one of those roles just as a safety net. If you're thinning out your first base and third base depth a little, with getting rid of one of Mayo or Mountcastle, it's a bit of a risk. So, and depth is very important, as we saw last year with the catching situation. So I do think at this stage of it's not even off season anymore. At this stage of spring training, it will take a pretty big deal to move either of them, because it's going to be harder to backfill the position.
For sure. The Orioles don't have,
but that's my feeling.
They don't have the same kind of minor league infield depth that they did in previous seasons.
Yes.
There's no Joey Ortiz is not walking through that door. Connor Norby is not walking through that door. It's going to be tough to fill those kind of spots. We're also talking about the 26th spot on the 26-man roster. The 25 guys in front of that guy are going to be much more impactful on this team. And we will, of course, have continued coverage of the 26 27, 28, however many guys you want to consider in that conversation, as Grapefruit League play begins Friday, game at 1 o'clock that is broadcast on Masson. Fans can actually watch the games down there now. A lot of games are being broadcast this year. It's the Orioles and Yankees. Andy, we always have a little internal debate amongst the beat as to who is going to start the first game of Grapefruit League play for the Orioles, and Craig Albarnez has not yet made an announcement on that.
Correct.
Yeah,
soon, I chose early, tomorrow we will find out who started the first Grapefruit League game. Also, Craig Albarnez was very pointed to say that, like, hey, don't read too much into a lineup. Like, this is training, so like don't doubt when a lineup comes or something. We have this like pool always with no money. Don't worry, there's no money, but we all like put in like, who do we think is the grapefruit? Yeah, the grapefruit opener. And this year I chose Cade Povich, and I know I lost because Cade Povich is throwing 2 innings today in a live BP session, and they simply would not have him throw 2 innings today to throw 2 innings on Friday. It's not going to happen. So we can pretty much rule out Cade Povich unless something crazy happens. So it's not me this year.
Who won that pool, by the way, last year, Andy?
I think you did. If I recall.
I did. You're absolutely correct, Andy. I won that pool. I did not input my my answer this year, so there will be no repeat championship for Paul Mancano.
Who do you think?
I thought a few weeks ago, Tyler Wells made sense. Even though he's probably going to be a bullpen arm for you, I think you give him a couple spring training starts. Why not have him throw an inning and a third? I could see it, right?
I'm going to change mine to Rico Garcia.
Okay, I like it
because here's why: he's pitching for Puerto Rico this year in the WBC, so he's going to need game action. And I picked Cade Povich, and it's probably not going to be Cade Povich, so I'm gonna pivot to Rico Garcia, a little bit of a sleeper pick there. Obviously a reliever, but you never know. That's my new pick. We'll find out tomorrow, though. I'll tweet it out.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. But by the time people are listening to this, they could already know.
Yes. Sorry, everybody. This is off the rails. This is what happens when you invite me.
I love it.
This is what happens.
I love it. It's just a different energy than when we have John on. And by the way, John has written a great story as well on thebanner.com about Craig Albarnez and what he's like running his first ever spring training. Some interesting news and notes and nuggets. Crying Jordan meme is in there. Just his daily jokes during press conferences. He is, as to use the joke from Seinfeld, the ass man. The joke being that Stephen Vogt only added associate manager to his title last season so that he could abbreviate that to ass man. The guy's hilarious. It's just a breath of fresh air to have Craig Albarnez in here. All right. Andy, at AF Kostka is his handle on all of the social medias, Blue Sky, X, all that good stuff. Read his great work as well. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Andy, thanks so much for hopping on. Enjoy the rest of the sunshine. I hope you get a couple more pickleball games in before you have to head back north.
Yeah, I'm hoping I have a better performance than yesterday. We played the other day, and I had a really nice. I ripped one down the line past like an 8-year-old dude. So I felt good about myself, beating up on the elderly of Sarasota. But I'm hoping that my yesterday performance wasn't indicative that I'm on the decline already. I do think that I'll get into the mix again, and I have some good kill shots. Hopefully not actually kill shots. That'd be really bad. Yeah.
Playing people in pickleball in Sarasota who are like, multiple times your senior and then having them kick your butt is very humbling. I won't lie. But still fun. All right. Thanks so much for joining us. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll read it out here on the show. We'll be back with another show for you at some point soon.